Daf Yomi, tractate Zevachim, page 96a, top of the page, with the words Ela Kederos Shel Mikdash. Amai, Amarachmana Yeshavu, Nadarinu Likivshonos, Amar Vizera Lefi She'en Osin Kivishonos B'Yerushalayim. The Gemara challenges, but according to the opinion that earthenware vessels can be cleansed of their absorbed substances by the process of kindling, with regard to pots used in the temple, why does the Merciful One state in the Torah that they should be broken? Let us simply return them to the kilns in which pots are made to be sure that the pots will be cleansed by the extreme heat of the kilns. Rabbi Zera said the pots cannot be returned to kilns because, as taught in a Braita, see Bava Kama 82b, kilns are not built in Jerusalem because of the great quantity of smoke they produce. Amar Abaye, Mechi Oisinash Patos Bazore Isht Mit De Hadetani Shemaya Bikal Nevo Shivre Kle Cheres Nivlaim Bimkoman. The Gemara presents an objection to Rabbi Zera's answer, and Abaye said, but if, as the Braita teaches, there are no kilns in Jerusalem, are scrap heaps of earthenware assembled in the temple courtyard? The same Braita also teaches that there are no scrap heaps in Jerusalem. What then is done with the shards of earthenware vessels that must be broken in the courtyard? The Gemara dismisses the question. Abaye raised that objection only because that which Shemaiah taught in Kal Nevo escaped him. Shemaiah taught there in the temple, shards of earthenware vessels were miraculously absorbed in their place. Ela Ahadam Rav Nachman Amar Baravu Tanur Shel Mikdash Shel Matechet Hava Nevad Cheres. The Gemara returns to the topic of kindling earthenware vessels and asks, but if kindling from within cleanses everything absorbed in an earthenware oven, what is the reason for that which Rav Nachman says, that Rabba Bar Avu says, the oven in the temple was fashioned of metal? Let us fashion it of earthenware, as an oven's kindling is from the inside, and accordingly it would be possible to cleanse it. The Gemara answers the reason the oven must be fashioned of metal is because there are the two loaves, meaning the public offering of Shavuot of 2 loaves from the new wheat, and the showbread, meaning the bread baked each week in a special form and displayed for the duration of 1 whole week on the table in the sanctuary, whose baking is done in the oven, and also whose sanctification occurs in the oven, because these offerings are not needed in a service vessel. They are sanctified only by being placed in the oven. Therefore, the oven is a service vessel, and we do not make a service vessel of earthenware. And now we turn to 96b, Sadik Vav Amid Beis, Amud Bet, top of the page. ואפילו רבי יוסי ברבי יהודה לא כלומר אלא לעץ אבל לחרס לא. And even Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Yehuda, says only that a service vessel may be fashioned of wood, which is a somewhat significant material, but with regard to a service vessel fashioned of earthenware, he holds that it is not valid. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yehuda, Havi Ragil Kamin Rabbi bar Chama, Shama Kiba Zabner Rav Sheshet. יום אחד ברבי אומר לה על כפתה נקטן ריח הסילה ליד משום דיעזד לך לקמן רב ששת הרי לך כי רב ששת. The Gemara relates an incident related to the halakha of scouring and rinsing. Rav Yitzchak bar Yehuda was initially accustomed to study Torah before Rami bar Chama. After some time, he left him and went to study before Rav Sheshet. One day, Rami bar Chama met him and said to him colloquially, "Did you assume, as many do, that when the chief of taxes," that word al-kafta, grasped me by the hand, the fragrance of his hand came to my hand? Which what he meant to say was, do you think that because, I think it's explaining it, do you think that because you went away from me in order to study before Rav Sheshet, have you become like Rav Sheshet merely by association? Okay. Amar lei lav mishum hachi mar ki be'ena milsa pshit lev מסבוע כי משכחנה מסניסה פרחלה רב ששת כי באין המילסה מיני פשיט לי ממסניסה דחינה ממשכחת מסניסה ופרחה מסניסה ומסניסה היא. רב יהודה Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yehuda said to him, "It is not due to that reason that I went to study before Rav Sheshet, but for another reason. As for you, Master, when I ask with regard to any matter, Master resolves the question for me through reasoning. Consequently, when I find a Mishnah that opposes that reasoning, it refutes Master's proposed resolution. As for Rav Sheshet, when I ask him of a question concerning any matter, he resolves the question for me by citing a Mishnah. Consequently, when I also find a Mishnah, and that Mishnah refutes the proposed resolution, it is a dispute between one Mishnah and another Mishnah, which does not necessarily refute the Mishnah that he cited." Amar lei, Be'irina milsa, Divshit lach, Kimas nisa ba'irine, Bishel mixas kli, Tamriko shtiva o, Ein ta'un, Amar lei, Eino ta'un, Midei dahavi ahaza'ah. Rami bar Chama said to him, "Ask me about a matter which I will resolve for you in accordance with the Mishnah." Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yehuda asked him, "If one cooked a sin offering in only part of a vessel, does the entire vessel require scouring and rinsing, or does it not require scouring and rinsing?" Rabbi bar Chama said to him, "The entire vessel does not require scouring and rinsing, just as it is taught concerning sprinkling the blood of the sin offering upon a garment. In the latter case, the Mishnah teaches in 93b that one must launder only the part of the garment on which the blood sprayed. V'ha lo tanachi amar lei mistavra kei beged ma beged enu taun kibus. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yehuda replied, but the Tanna does not teach this explicitly. Rami bar Chama said to him, "Nevertheless, it stands to reason that the scouring and rinsing of a vessel in which the sacred meat was cooked should be like the laundering of a garment as follows, just as a garment requires laundering only in the place where the blood was sprayed, so too it must be that a vessel requires scouring and rinsing only in the place where the meat underwent the process of cooking. Amar le mi dami dam lo mifa pa bishul mifa pa ve'od tanya chomer behazaa mimarika ushtifa vechomer mimarika ushtifa mi behazaa. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yehuda said to him, are the situations comparable? Blood does not spread and penetrate all parts of the garment, but in the case of cooking, the flavor of the meat spreads throughout the entire vessel. Additionally, your reasoning opposes that which is taught in a Braita, Tosefta 10:15. A certain stringency applies to sprinkling more than it applies to scouring and rinsing, and a certain stringency applies to scouring and rinsing more than it applies to sprinkling. Chomer v'hazaa shehazaa yesh lemechatos hachitzonos u'v'chatos hapnimios v'yeshna lifnei zerika ma she'en kein beverika u'shetifa. The Braita continues, the stringency that applies to sprinkling is that the halakha of the sprinkling of blood on a garment applies to external sin offerings brought on the altar in the temple courtyard, and to internal sin offerings whose blood is sprinkled on the altar in the sanctuary. And the halakha of blood sprayed onto a garment applies if it sprays before he requires sprinkling of the offering's blood on the altar, which is not so in the case of scouring and rinsing. Scouring and rinsing are required only for external sin offerings whose meat is eaten and therefore cooked, and it applies only after the sprinkling of blood on the altar, after which the meat may be eaten. Chomer b'mariko shetifa, shemariko shetifa negas ben kodshim ka'alim, Vishu b'miktzas hakli tal mariko shetifa kol hakli ma she'en kem v'hazaa. The Braita continues, the stringency that applies to scouring and rinsing is that the scouring and rinsing of vessels is practiced both for offerings of the most sacred order and for offerings of lesser sanctity, and even if one cooked in only part of the vessel, the entire vessel requires scouring and rinsing, which is not so in the case of errantly sprinkling blood onto a garment, for which one must launder only the place on which the blood sprayed. Amar le itanya tanya v'tamamai amar kra v'im mekli nechoshet b'shala afilu b'mikzat kli. Rabbi Yehoshua said to him, if this Braita is taught, it is taught, and I cannot take issue with it. The Gemara then clarifies, and what is the reason that the entire vessel requires scouring and rinsing even if one cooked the meat of an offering in only part of the vessel? The reason is that the verse states, and if it be cooked in a copper vessel, it shall be scoured and rinsed in water. Leviticus 6:21. From the phrase in a copper vessel, it is derived that even if the meat is cooked in only part of a vessel, the entire vessel must be scoured and rinsed. Echad kodshe kodshim v'chulotan rabbanan chatas ein yela chatas kol kodshim minayin tamid lo mal kodesh kodeshim hi. The Mishnah teaches whether the meat is from offerings of the most sacred order or whether it is from offerings of lesser sanctity. The vessels in which it is cooked must be scoured and rinsed. The Gemara cites a related brisa. The sages taught the Torah introduces the mitzvah of scouring and rinsing with the qualifying statement. This is the law of sin offering, Leviticus 6:18. From this verse I have derived only that the halakha with regard to scouring and rinsing applies to vessels in which a sin offering is cooked. From where do I derive that this halakha applies to vessels used for all sacrificial meat? The verse states, every male among the priests may eat of it. It is most sacred, Leviticus 6:22. To teach that this halakha applies to vessels used for all of the sacrificial meat that the priests eat. Okay, and okay. All the sacrificial meat that the priests eat. Weiter, where were we? The verse states, every male among the priests may eat of it as most sacred, Leviticus 6:22, to teach that this halakha applies to vessels used for all of the sacrificial meat that the priests eat. I think that's where we were at. Yeah. Okay, Yachol Shani Marbe Esat Teruma Tamid Loma Oisa Prat Truma de Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shimon Ameh Koshikoshim Tunin Benikam Ushtiva Kachukale Menan Tunin Menakishtiva the Chziv Kodesh Kodeshim in Kodeshim Kalim. No. The Braita continues, one might have thought that I should include vessels used for cooking truma, the portion of the produce designated for the priest, as well as it is also sacred and may be eaten only by a priest. See Leviticus 22:14. To counter this, the verse states, every male among the priests may eat of it. It is most sacred, Leviticus 6:22. The emphatic qualifier of it excludes truma. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon says offerings of the most sacred order require scouring and rinsing, but offerings of lesser sanctity do not require scouring and rinsing, as it is written, most sacred. Accordingly, with regard to offerings of the most sacred order, yes, scouring and rinsing is required, but for offerings of lesser sanctity, no, it is not required. My time, the Rabbi Yehuda, midi tzrich oisa lemute troma, michlal lekochim kalim tunim merika ushetifo, the Rabbi Shimon amar lach, ota kedamrinan. The Gemara asks, the Braita explains Rabbi Shimon's reasoning. What is the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda? The Gemara answers, since the qualifying term of it was necessary to exclude truma, by inference, it must be that vessels used for offerings of lesser sanctity require scouring and rinsing. If even offerings of lesser sanctity are excluded from the halakha of scouring and rinsing, it would be self-evident that the vessel used for truma is exempt from scouring and rinsing. Accordingly, the direct exclusion of truma indicates that the vessels used for offerings of lesser sanctity are not excluded, and Rabbi Shimon could have said to you, the term of it teaches a different halakha, and excludes a disqualified sin offering from the halakha of scouring and rinsing, as we say earlier in this chapter, 93a. Utruma loboya shtiva marika. The Tanya Kadera Shibishul Ba Basar Levashel Ba Chalav Tim Bishel Benotan Tam Benotin Tam Truma Lo Yevashel Ba Chunin The Gemara asks, and is it correct that with regard to a copper vessel used to cook truma, it does not require rinsing and scouring, but is it taught in Braita, except to truma 8:16, with regard to a pot, which one cooks meat, one may not cook milk with it, and if one cooked milk in it, the meat absorbed in the pot renders the milk forbidden, if it imparts flavor to it. Similarly, if one cooked truma in a pot, one may not cook non-sacred food in it, and if one cooked non-sacred food in it, the absorbed truma renders the mixture sacred if it imparts flavor to it. Therefore, a pot requires purging with boiling liquid in order to expel the flavor of truma from it. Abaye Amal. Oh no, I'm sorry. Amar Abaye. Lo sricha. Ela Amar Mar Bishem Mixos Kli. Taun Yerika Shtiva Kol Kli. Hatruma Lo Yitzrich Ela Mekom Bishu. 3 Amoraim address the apparent inconsistency that while the Torah excludes vessels used for truma from the halacha of scouring and rinsing, the Braita teaches that these vessels must be purged. Abaye said, when the verse excludes truma from the halacha of scouring and rinsing, it is necessary only for that which the master said, if one cooked in only part of the vessel, the entire vessel requires scouring and rinsing. By contrast, in this case, if truma was cooked only in part of the vessel, one must perform scouring and rinsing only in the place of the cooking and not in the whole vessel. Rava Amar lo tzricha ela de'amar mar b'mayim v'lo b'yayin b'mayim v'lo b'mazug ha'afilu b'yayin v'afilu b'mazug. Rava said, when the verse excludes truma from the halacha of scouring and rinsing, that is necessary only for that which the master said. The verse specifies it shall be scoured and rinsed in water, Leviticus 6:21. But the vessel is not to be scoured and rinsed in wine. It must be scoured and rinsed in water, but not diluted in wine. By contrast, in this case, meaning the vessel in which truma was cooked, it may be scoured and rinsed even in wine and even in diluted wine. Okay? Rava Bar Ula Amar Lo Tzricha Ela Damar Mar Mariko Shatif B'Tzainan Hafilu B'Chamin. Rava Bar Ula said, when the verse excludes truma from the halacha of scouring and rinsing, this is necessary only for that which the master said one must perform scouring and rinsing with cold water, in addition to purging a vessel of its absorbed flavors with boiling water. By contrast, in this case, meaning with regard to the vessel in which truma was cooked, one may cleanse the vessel even by performing only the purging with boiling water, which removes the residue of the forbidden food, and omitting the cold water processes entirely. Ha nichlamad alma Mariko Shtivas Bezoinen Ella Lamada Marika Mechamin Ushtifa Bezoinen Maikleme Mal Shtifa Yeterita. The Gemara asks, this works out well according to the one who says that scouring and rinsing are performed with cold water. But according to the one who says that scouring is done by purging with hot water and rinsing is a different procedure performed with cold water, what can be said? According to his opinion, the verse is also referring to purging, and if the verse excludes vessels used for truma, how does the Braita teach that such vessels must be purged? The Gemara answers, according to the opinion that differentiates scouring, which is done with boiling water, from rinsing, which is done with cold water. The Torah excludes vessels used for truma only from the additional rinsing that the Torah requires after the scouring. That concludes the Talmud on this Mishnah, and now we start a new Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Rabbi Tarfon Omer Bishel Mitchilas Haregel Yivashel Kol Haregel V'Chol Ad Zman Achila Merika Shtifa Merika Kemirika Takos Ushtifa Kishtifa Takos Merika Ushtifa Betzoyin." Rabbi Tarfon, again, new Mishnah. Rabbi Tarfon says, if one cooked a sin offering in a copper vessel from the beginning of the pilgrimage festival, one may cook in it for the entire pilgrimage, right? So the whole festival. He need not scour and rinse the vessel after every use. And the rabbis say, one may not continue using it in this manner. Rather, one must perform scouring and rinsing before the end of the period during which partaking of the particular cooking offering is permitted. Scouring is like the scouring of the inside of a cup. The cleaning done when wine sticks to the cup, and rinsing is like the rinsing of the outside of the cup. Scouring and rinsing are performed with cold water.